Hello and welcome to Classic Country Backstories. I'm Colleen Gallagher. Today we'll delve into part 2 of my research on the life, career, and death of country bluegrass comedic star David Stringbean Akeman, along with the death of his wife Estelle. If you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you go back and watch it. You'll get to know who David and Estelle were, and you'll learn about his fascinating career. That's what makes this episode more tragic. I want to let you know I'll be discussing some details that some may find disturbing. We'll talk about the murders, crime scene, details, and the trial itself. While showing respect for the Akemans, the truth of what happened will be discussed. So here's the second part of the story on Stringbean and Estelle Akeman.
Nashville, Tennessee, country music capital of the world, home of the Grand Ole Opry, where singers and dreamers come seeking stardom. Join me as we learn about the lives and careers of those who built this town on Classic Country Backstories.
November 10th, 1973 was a chilly and frosty morning at the ridgetop home of Stringbean and Estelle. The smoke rose from the chimney of the small cabin. Stringbean rang his friend, Grandpa Jones, that morning to confirm what time he would pick String up in the morning for their hunting trip. After talking for a few minutes, Grandpa told String that he would see him later that evening when they would both perform at the Grand Ole Opry. Ramona Jones and Estelle Akeman had made plans to go out for a steak dinner while their husbands were out of town. You see, Stringbean would not eat beef. He said the smell gagged him. So Estelle was looking forward to their upcoming dinner. After breakfast, David and his neighbor, Bear Burnett, went out to cut firewood. Later in the day, he loaded up his Vega No. 9 banjo, along with some songs written on hotel stationery, into the trunk of his Cadillac. He then loaded his satchel containing his stage costume, some checks he had yet to cash, along with a .22 revolver. He's wearing a black jacket, striped shirt, and a pair of overalls that he had $3,182 stashed in the front pocket. The wad of cash consisted of 30 $100 bills, 9 $20 bills, and 2 $1 bills. Estelle is wearing a black and white checkered jacket, black pants, and black loafers with red lining. She also had $2,150 pinned to her bra. The couple make the trek down the long driveway and turn right onto Baker Station Road, then make the half-hour drive to the Ryman Auditorium. When the Akemans arrive at the Ryman, they meet up with Grandpa and Ramona. Grandpa and Stringbean talk about their hunting trip plans. Ironically, Estelle and Ramona talk about crime being on the rise. For the first show, Stringbean was on the 7 o'clock segment sponsored by Rudy's. After a long introduction by Tex Ritter, String, along with Kurt Gibson, took the Opry stage, where String sang Hillbilly Fever. Then he invited the audience of 3,000 to join him in singing Y'all Come. He had the audience so stirred up that Ritter called him back out for an encore. When the show ended, at 9 p.m., Stacey Harris, a young freelance reporter, was waiting to interview Bobby Bear. Somehow the interview didn't happen, but Stringbean told her she could interview him instead. String talked about his career and his happiness of being on Hee Haw. He also spoke about the new Opry House being built. He thought it would be more convenient and more comfortable, while thinking it may lose a little bit of its old flair. He told Harris that he enjoyed meeting people, talking to them, and signing autographs. String then performed on the second show during the 10:15 portion, sponsored by Union 76. Once again, Tex Ritter gave him a long introduction. Ritter announced, since being on Hee Haw, his price has gone up and his pantaloons have gone down a little bit. The crowd laughed. When String and Kurt Gibson entered the stage, String waddled out and swings his arm up in a Babe Ruth pose. Then he approaches the mic and says, "How sweet it is." The crowd roared and the flashbulbs of the cameras lit up the front of the stage. Stringbean then launched into Going to the Opry to Make Myself a Name. Then he followed it up with Hot Corn, Cold Corn. When the song was over, he did his famous hat flip and left the stage. Before going to change out of his costume, he asked Kurt to run over a song for next week. The final song that David Stringbean Akeman ever sang was Lord, I'm Coming Home. When they finished the run-through, Stringbean headed to the dressing room to change and pack up. He wanted to get home to rest since he had to get up early for the hunting trip. According to later accounts, both little Jimmy Dickens and Ronnie Stoneman had a foreboding feeling as String and Estelle were getting ready to leave the Ryman and head toward Goodlettsville and their ridgetop home. They told him to be careful, to which Akeman told them, "I got a friend," patting the pocket that held his revolver. After saying goodnight, Estelle drove her and Stringbean away from the Ryman for the final time, sometime after 10:40. They probably listened to the Opry as they made their way to the cabin. They had no way of knowing they were to become one of the most tragic stories to ever take place in country music history. Grandpa was up before daylight the next morning, loading his Lincoln with his clothes, guns, and hunting gear. He told String that he would pick him up at 6, then they would head to Virginia to hunt grouse. When Jones topped the hill, he could see Akeman's cabin, and he noticed something unusual. String always made a fire when he got up in the morning, but there was no smoke coming from the chimney that morning. He began to make his way up the driveway. He noticed what appeared to be a coat laying in the grass. As he got closer, he realized there was a body wearing the coat. He stopped the car and quickly made his way to the body. Then he realized it was Estelle, laying face down. When he touched her, she was cold, and he realized she was dead. Then he realized she'd been shot in the back of the head. Grandpa Jones ran toward the cabin, calling out for Stringbean. He noticed Akeman's case containing the Vega 9 banjo sitting on the front porch. When he grabbed the storm door handle, he saw that the front door was open. He looked inside to see his best friend Stringbean lying in front of the unlit fireplace. Before leaving, he realized the phone line had been cut. He rushed home and he called the Tennessee State Highway Patrol. Then he and Ramona returned to the intersection of 41 and Baker Station Road to meet the State Patrol and lead them to the crime scene. Ramona later sadly reported that she remembered seeing frost on Estelle's hair and hearing the radio that was still playing in the house. Roy Acuff managed to beat the detectives to the cabin. Soon other friends, along with Davidson County, Metro Police, and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigations, arrived at the crime scene. Investigators came to the conclusion that the Akemans may have known something was amiss when they returned home. Oscar Sullivan later gave a statement to the police that Stringbean had a burglar alarm. He noticed that String had a fishing line wired from one point to another across the cattle gap leading to the house. This alarm could have tipped Stringbean off that there were intruders in the house, causing Akeman to draw his gun and shoot. Stringbean was lying face down in front of the fireplace with his right arm outstretched and his finger bent as if holding a gun. However, there was no gun around him. It appeared there was a shootout because .32 caliber bullet casings were found in the house and in the driveway, along with one .22 casing found in the bedroom doorway and one in the woodpile next to the fireplace. Grandpa Jones told investigators of the .22 that Akeman kept in his show bag. Officers determined that other guns were missing as well. Marlboro and Raleigh cigarette butts pointed to more than one perpetrator. The Akemans' Ford Torino station wagon was found parked at a nearby quarry. On the ground was a paper bag and Pall Mall cigarettes indicating a possible third killer. Friends of the Akemans could not think of them having enemies, but many of them spoke about them packing around large amounts of cash. There were also rumors of money in the house. None was found by the police, but some suspected that the murderers found cash and took it. Whatever the case was, it appeared to be premeditated. Ironically, the murderers did not find the cash in Stringbean's overalls or the money hid in Estelle's bra. David Stringbean Akeman was just 58 years old. Estelle was only 59. The bodies of David and Estelle were taken to the Phillips Robinson Funeral Home, where Dr. T.E. Simpkins performed the autopsies. Stringbean died of a single gunshot to the heart. There were abrasions on his knees and shins, as well as the knuckles on his right hand, indicating he punched something or someone. Estelle suffered 3 gunshots, one through her right shoulder blade, one entered the back of her left arm above her elbow, and the third entered her right ear, exiting in the middle of the back of her cranium. This fatal shot was close up and point blank in the head. The funeral was held at Phillips Robinson Funeral Home. Their caskets were side by side, with Estelle's head at David's feet. One flower arrangement was shaped like a steering wheel, commemorating all the years Estelle drove David. Some were shaped like fish and pipes. David was dressed in a blue suit with a tie. A quartet sang How Great Thou Art and Precious Memories. The funeral home could only hold 800 people, so most stood outside during the service. Then a procession of 300 cars made its way to Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens. Stringbean and Estelle were buried near Hawkshaw Hawkins, Cowboy Copas, and Randy Hughes in a section called Music Row. On November 14th, District Attorney General Tom Shriver got word that a man was being held for arson at a Metro jail and had information about the Akeman murders. The man's name was Felix Elliott. He was a resident of Greenbrier and drove trucks for the Cherokee Hauling and Rigging Company. He heard some acquaintances talking about Stringbean before the murders, and they talked about robbing the Grand Ole Opry star. He was hoping he could use this information to get his arson charges dropped. The names he gave were Charlie Brown, his brothers Doug and Roy, and their cousin John. Charlie was a welder and investor whose wife's all-star talent agency Stringbean had worked with. When Charlie Brown was questioned, he had already hired a high-dollar attorney and was defiant about answering questions. Charlie denied having any knowledge about the murders. So did Doug and Roy. Eventually, Charlie's lawyer said that Charlie knew nothing about the killings. He did say that John and Doug had came to him on the evening of November 10th wanting to borrow a gun. They said they were going to pull some kind of a job because they needed money. Charlie said he gave them a $100 bill. This is also the account that Doug Brown later gave. Some speculated that Doug and John Brown heard stories about the Akemans carrying large amounts of money from Charlie or his wife, giving them the motive for robbing Stringbean and Estelle. Doug Brown's brother Jim was questioned and told that he had heard Charlie and Doug talking about Stringbean. He said Doug claimed that he was going to get $25,000 from somewhere. On Thursday, November 15th, the Tennessean newspaper received an anonymous phone call one night around 1 o'clock. Frank Ritter, city editor, said the caller was not drunk but grief-stricken. The caller said it was all a mistake. He and his partner thought Stringbean was on tour and would not be home. He went on to say they were startled when Stringbean returned. He stated that his partner shot Stringbean with one of his own guns. Then he stressed that his partner did all the shooting. On November 16th, John Brown returned to Nashville as he had been out of town when they were looking for him. He turned himself in at the police headquarters. When questioned about the whereabouts the night of the crimes, he simply stated that he'd been riding around on Broadway. We would later learn that John had the most violent history of the Brown boys. On Monday, March 4th, the Davidson County Grand Jury returned a 2-count murder indictment against John and Doug Brown, along with an indictment of accessory after the fact of murder and for concealing stolen property for Roy. John Brown hired Arnold Peebles, who was one of the most dynamic young attorneys in Nashville. He entered an insanity plea for his client, but by July 1974, he was deemed fit to stand trial. He also tried to convince the judge that Charlie Brown had masterminded the deal and actually paid John and Doug $100 as a down payment to commit the robbery. Finally, on Sunday, July 21st, immediately following the decision of John's insanity plea, Larry Brenton, a reporter for the Nashville Banner, received a phone call from attorney Joe Binkley letting him know that Doug Brown wanted to make a statement. Doug spoke to Brenton for more than 2 hours. He explained that he was having money problems and planned to rob Stringbean after hearing that he had $25,000 stashed on his property. They drove around all day, then went to Charlie's to borrow a gun. Charlie refused, gave them the $100, and told them to forget about the robbery. They went to the house. They saw the station wagon, they backed it out to the road and put up the hood as if having vehicle problems. Then they went around the field to the back door and broke in. The two ransacked the house, and when they found no money, they decided to wait for the Akemans to come home and rob them. They turned on the radio to listen to the Opry so they would know when Stringbean and Estelle would return home. After they put some of Akeman's guns, along with other items, in a pillowcase, they drank some beer from the refrigerator and smoked, awaiting their return. John kept watch at the window but was still surprised when they pulled in the drive and Stringbean came in shooting. Doug knocked him down on his back and was holding his arm outstretched while he was still shooting. Then David's body went limp after John shot him. At that moment, Estelle appeared in the doorway. She screamed and ran away from the house. John shot once to stop her. Then he shot her, execution style, while she begged for her life. When he came back to the house, he was holding Estelle's purse. Both Stringbean and Estelle lay dead. John rolled Stringbean over to search his back pockets for money. That's why Grandpa Jones found him face down the next morning. John and Doug took the keys to the station wagon, loaded up the guns and chainsaw, and drove it along with John's car to the quarry. They moved the stolen property to John's car. They took the 2 bags that David had brought home with him and shoved it into the other, with all contents still inside, and threw the bag into Bloodworth's pond along Ebenezer Road, where they had played as kids. Doug reported that one of the bags contained Stringbean's costume, a will, the gun, and $8,000 to $10,000 in uncashed checks from Opryland. Doug said he hadn't come forward sooner because he was afraid of John. He also admitted to making the anonymous phone call to the Tennessean. He insisted that it was never intended to be a murder. The reporter immediately collected photographer Jack Gunner and Sherman Nickens. Then they headed to the pond. They didn't find the pond that night, but was successful when they went back out the next morning. Nickens and Gunner retrieved the satchel, which was floating. They drove to Nickens' home in Goodlettsville, where they examined the contents containing the checks from Opryland, contract from Wilhelm Agency, along with String's costume and hat. There was a hole ripped in the bottom of the bag. Another group went back out and searched. They found another floating bag. This one contained papers with Stringbean's name and rocks. One of the bags were rumored to contain a will, but none was ever found, and murder weapons were never recovered. At the last minute, Judge Cornelius granted severance of Roy's trial from Doug and John's. John pleaded not guilty. Doug pled guilty to second-degree murder of Stringbean and not guilty to the murder of Estelle. The trial of John and Doug Brown began on October the 28th, 1974, and was finished by November the 2nd. The jury began to deliberate at 5:15 and came back with a verdict 2.5 hours later at 8:45 p.m. Both John and Doug were found guilty on first degree for the murders of David and Estelle Akeman. The jury recommended that the sentences be served concurrently, but Judge Cornelius changed the ruling to consecutive sentences, with each man eligible for pardon in 30 years. John and Doug sat quietly, showing no emotion. Their wives cried. The Browns were sent to the Tennessee State Penitentiary. Later, Doug would be moved to Mountain State Penitentiary in East Tennessee. John Brown held no ill will against Doug, but did have hard feelings against Charlie. He continued to say that there were at least 2 other people at the Akemans' home the night of the murders, besides him and Doug. In December of 1974, David's brother Robert donated the Vega No. 9 banjo to the Country Music Hall of Fame. Appeals for the Browns continued throughout the 1980s. As the 90s began, John and Doug Brown both attempted to receive parole, but they were denied. Time passed, but Stringbean was not forgotten. In 1996, a statue was put up in Jackson County, Kentucky. It coincided with the first Stringbean Memorial Bluegrass Festival. Porter Wagner unveiled the statue, and it was attended by Grandpa and Ramona Jones. The festival continued through 2024, when its promoter, Philip Akeman, died. In 1997, it was reported that money had been hidden in the Akemans' house. According to a report, it was hidden behind a block in the fireplace mantel. Later, a man named Jason McCaslin claimed to be the one who found the money while renovating the house prior to new tenants. Whether it really happened or not, the story has become part of the Stringbean lore. Hee Haw ended its run in 1997. Grandpa Jones suffered 2 strokes after performing at the Grand Ole Opry and died on February 29, 1998. On January 8, 2003, Doug Brown died at Brushy Run of natural causes. John Brown reportedly committed himself to God, driven by his wife Deborah's encouragement through the Cornerstone Church. Maury Davis became a pastor at the church in the 1990s. He had murdered a woman in 1975, but reportedly found God and became a minister. One of Cornerstone's missions is to hire ex-cons who have been paroled. Throughout the years, Opry stars like Jan Howard, Gene Shepard, Bill Anderson, and Mac Wiseman regularly appeared at the parole hearings for the Browns, making statements they should never be released. However, time has also taken some of those who have fought to keep John Brown incarcerated. On Monday, November 3, 2014, John Brown was set free after more than 40 years in prison. The country music community was enraged. Mac Wiseman said that this was a great miscarriage of justice. Although David Stringbean Akeman and his wife Estelle have been gone for over 50 years, his legacy remains strong. His Vega No. 9 banjo remains in possession of Country Music Hall of Fame, and the banjo that was given to him after Uncle Dave Macon's death resides at Groon Guitars in Nashville. Bluegrass music is stronger than ever, thanks to great entertainers like Stringbean. The tragic end of the Akemans left a permanent void in the Grand Ole Opry, marking the loss of 2 of its most beloved and unassuming figures. While David Stringbean Akeman is remembered as a bridge between the old-time banjo styles of the 19th century and modern country comedy, Estelle is honored as his steadfast partner who managed their simple life and supported his transition into a TV icon on Hee Haw. Their deaths on November 10, 1973, shook the music industry so deeply that it fundamentally changed the security and privacy of country music stars forever. Today, they rest at the Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens, remembered less for the violence of their passing, more for the gentle traditional lives they lived. That wraps up this episode of Classic Country Backstories. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel because it helps us out a bunch. You can also leave a comment on what you'd like to see. For now, take care, God bless, and I'll see you later.